let's assess Boris Johnson's time in office now. Christopher Hope is the assistant editor and chief political correspondent at The Telegraph. Would you say, Christopher, it's been a challenging 2 years?
I think definitely. I think that was really interesting what they were saying to you in Lee there, and that MP as well. I think what's happened is he did get Brexit done. I mean, don't forget that when he came to power 2 years ago, this place was in ferment. No one knew what was going to happen next. No one could see a way through the Brexit impasse. And then he had this kind of berserker approach to it, slightly kind of almost mad, insane way of trying to prorogue Parliament, and then had a legal battle. Then they got a deal that was broadly acceptable. There's issues in Northern Ireland, we know that, not resolved, could get worse second half of this year. But I think, thank goodness he got Brexit done back in January last year, because that was as this virus was breaking in China, and had he not taken that really firm action on Brexit, it could well have dragged on into this year, and we could be stuck with having this no man's land of trying to work out, do we need a second vote to confirm the first vote? So I think that's a big tick. I think since March last year, the government's been in a degree of cryogenic isolation. I should say, nothing's happening. They can't really focus on things. He's trying to do speeches to claw back what he thinks about stuff, like on levelling up, but it was a bit of an unfocused ideas fest, no actual policy. He's moved government departments north. Well, that's good for levelling up. That brings better paid public sector jobs into areas in the north, and that's good, maybe. But a big tick would have been social care, some kind of deal announced today, 2 years on, 2 years since he came to government, saying he had a deal planned. He had an idea on social care planned, oven ready. Well, nothing's happened yet. And of course, the irony was it was all fell apart because the three main protagonists negotiating it, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson and Sajid Javid, one got coronavirus and the other two had to go and self-isolate. So that's the irony of it all. This virus keeps clawing its way back into the government's consciousness. And there's very little marking of this 2-year anniversary in today's papers. I can't find much about it. It's almost just a kind of, that's that, but, what's next? I mean, what's next really for Boris Johnson? He's got 2.5 years now until the next election. I mean, that's not a lot of time to try and cement a legacy. He wants to get building homes quickly. Will he hit his 300,000 homes a year target by the middle of the decade? I think there's an election in May 24, reshuffle this autumn. He's really got to get all of his domestic policy into about 2 and a bit years. Not easy.
I mean, like you say, we're sort of 2 years in, not many people hanging out the bunting to celebrate his premiership so far. We've had Brexit done, but marred by the Northern Irish Protocol that remains with a big question mark. We've had a questionable response to the pandemic. He's also had his fair share of personal challenges, with a slightly disgruntled ex-employee leaking his WhatsApps. I mean, what are his chances of, at the end of 2.5 years after that, actually cementing a legacy as a decent Prime Minister, rather than someone who had a questionable relationship with the truth, as I think one of his Eton school reports described him?
Well, putting that to one side, but I think he's got a chance to try and get on with cementing what Johnsonianism means. It's not really clear at the moment, but I think that it's the same for Keir Starmer. I mean, Keir Starmer disappeared, really. He hasn't talked to a live audience since he became leader in April last year. I think this autumn is the period, I think, when British politics takes off again after this slumber period, while it's been trying to cope with this unseen, unknown enemy called coronavirus. I think it's going to be really fascinating autumn. There'll be huge battles about planning. He's going to take on his core base in the south amongst Conservatives and try and force through changes which could mean a lot of building. The Manhattanization of parts of the suburbs of London, according to one senior Tory MP. That's a big battle coming up. Social care, undecided. He's promised something by the end of this year. He's failed to hit his target. Well, it wasn't even a target, but he failed to do anything within the first 2 years. But I think people understand it's a challenge. And look at the polls. I think it's narrowed recently, but I last saw him, or the Tories, 5 points ahead of Labour, 2 years in. That's not bad. That's not bad given what he's been up against. But I do think the honeymoon caused by Kate Bingham's extraordinary victory on the rollout of the vaccine is probably fading. Events will start to get in the way. He's still in self-isolation, returns to number 10 working on Monday. He's got to get on and find new things to do.
There's no doubt that there have been challenges along the way, but I was in Leigh in Greater Manchester. We heard from some of the people a little bit earlier on, and a lot of them were saying to me, actually, we voted for Boris Johnson, we voted for the Conservative Party. They've been Labour for years, but the first time they voted for the Conservatives, they're in. And a lot of them said to me, no matter who was in power, it was going to be a challenge with this pandemic, smack bang in the middle of it. But actually, there's been some successes as well. The vaccine rollout has been hugely successful, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean that's certainly the big tick. I mean, if the coronavirus situation was a game of two halves, he was definitely 3-0 down at half time and probably one man sent off. But he's managed to pull it round, I think, with this rollout of this vaccine, and that's almost forgotten. But I mean, forgotten for now. But Dominic Cummings keeps trying to remind us with revealing these WhatsApp messages from the PM. I think there'll be a big debate about care home deaths, won't there, from last year and other things, and that will start to come out as this inquiry starts early next year. But I wouldn't expect that to end any time before the election, and he probably knows that. These inquiries take years and years. The Chilcot inquiry into the Iraq War took, I think, 5 or 6 years, given the war itself was only a few months long. So I think once people lawyer up ahead of an inquiry, that will mean it'll just be ticking on and not really, and there'll be some eruptions from it, but no actual conclusions before the next election.
Now, there's, as you say, 2.5 years till the next general election. Do you think the future looks bright for Boris Johnson?
I think it is bright. I think he's got a hell of a challenge there. I think Keir Starmer's got to win 124 seats, I think, to overturn the Tory majority, and he's nowhere in Scotland. So he's got to win all those seats somewhere in the north of England or the southwest, or even maybe the home counties, if you believe the hype. That's really hard. That's a massive challenge. I'm not sure even Keir Starmer can do that. I think Keir Starmer passes the test of blink, and you can imagine him being Prime Minister. I'm not sure the team around him is strong enough. We don't know who they are. I'm not sure they're fully trusted by Middle England. I think there needs to be a big battle that Keir Starmer's got to fight this autumn to demonstrate to Middle England, to our readers at Telegraph, that Labour is changing and is electable, and I can't see it just yet. So I think Boris Johnson is set fair, really, for a second term. And I think that's probably, you could argue, a good thing for the country if that happens, because I think the Brexit uncertainty means you need to have somebody who believes in the idea that Brexit is an opportunity, not a problem for this country. And I think that if Boris Johnson does win next time, that might be seen by historians as a good sort of 10-year period of settling into this post-Brexit life with someone who believes in the idea of Brexit rather than it as a challenge or a problem, which could have happened under a different leader, or maybe even Labour.
Thank you ever so much for shedding some light on what on earth Johnstonianism might mean. Hope we'll get to speak to you again in another 2 years. We'll speak to you in another 2 years and see if we've got an answer. Thank you ever so much for joining us.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.